QB chasing.
G'day, listeners, and welcome back to another very special episode of the Matter Mentality podcast, where we talk all things training, nutrition, and psychology to maximize your performance. Today, we are joined by good friend, previous guest, and fellow jacked nerd, intellect, nerdy jacked guy from America. Basically, the doc. We call him Doc. Dr. Mike T. Nelson, thank you for jumping back on, sir. There's a list of things I could put in that intro that would do you justice, but I thought I'd ruin it and just say, nothing actually relevant. So, how are you doing, sir? Thank you for jumping back on. We're about to rip into some very fun topics, and I'm sure we're going to annoy some people.
Very good. Your check's in the mail. It's the only time I've ever been referred to as some jack guy twice. So I feel like, yeah, I must be doing something right, I guess.
Jack nerds were a rare breed.
Yeah, that's right.
Got to take the most of it. How's the freezing cold? We were just discussing off air about how it's negative 400 degrees Fahrenheit right now in Minnesota.
It is freaking cold. I think air temp is supposed to get down to minus 16 Fahrenheit tonight. We were just trying to look up to see what temp in centigrade or Celsius that is. It's
cold. It's cold.
Really cold, and it's windy right now. Yeah, but it I don't know, you get kind of sort of used to it after a while. Then I do stupid things like training in a garage that's 42 degrees Fahrenheit and hang out in this morning I did my cold water immersion in 41 degrees Fahrenheit of water up to my eyeballs. So
Is it a weird sensory shock when it's like you go from the heater in the garage and you step outside and it's almost like hot and cold exposure a bit instantly, and it's not water, it's just you train and then you go outside, it's frozen, and then it's hot.
Yeah, I tried to go outside this morning to get my couple of minutes of sunlight, and I just did it in a sweatshirt and a pair of shorts and thought I would stand on the little patio here, and I realized that was freaking cold. Like the little hairs on my leg were not happy. I made it a minute and a half and thought, this is pretty fucking dumb. I need to go in.
Yeah, we are on the polar ends of the spectrum here, because Australia gets to we've had summer days recently of especially over the Christmas break, there was 35s and 37s. I think at one point the center of Australia, the part of Victoria was the hottest place in the world for a period over our summer. It was 45 to 47 degrees Celsius, I believe, which is
what the hell is that? That's what is the temp in Fahrenheit?
It's hot. Don't actually know what is.
I'm doing it right now. 113. Holy crap!
Go. Yeah, Eek. So that's
horrible.
It gets to the point where there's certain roads you can't drive on because the heat will melt your tires.
Oh, geez.
So that's a concern that happens here. Here, you guys are, though, with exploding frozen trees. So you guys get the opposite. Our stuff catches fire every summer, and you guys our trees explode due to cold.
Yeah. It's weird. Minnesota has big extremes. It can get pretty warm in the summer. It can get 100 degrees here. It doesn't happen all that much, but it can be kind of humid for a while. But yeah, one extreme to the next, but it doesn't stay for super long periods of time usually either.
I remember Dr. Dill was telling me, I was messaging him about something, and the Chicago area can be equally as frozen cold, like the tundra, as it can be equally as hot as Australia. I don't know what weather climate that exists in, where that's the environment that's possible, but it can reach the 35s in Celsius, but it can also reach the negative 30s. And is it Lake Michigan? No, what's it called? The Chicago Lake.
Yeah, Michigan would be the lake there.
Yeah, Lake Michigan. It freezes solid, and you can just basically drive across it and walk across. It's just a desolate, frozen Siberia. So yeah, you guys are weird.
You don't do things like that.
You don't do things in half-ass average bell curves. There's 3 standard deviations this way and 3 this way. That's what we're gonna do.
Oh yeah. It's my little rule for the garage gym is I do have a heater in it now, which is nice because I can leave all the bars in there. Because the worst part was the if you get warmed up and you do stuff like the air temp, even if it's cold, it's not so bad. It was the
Yep.
fact that so I do a lot of grip stuff. So I had a 2 inch solid axle. Like you put your hands on that when the thing is like close to freezing, and
Oh
other
yeah.
than your hands might actually stick to it. It is the worst sensation in the world. It is not intuitive for you to want to do more than one rep. It's so getting it to, I've played with the temp, but if I get it to like 42 degrees Fahrenheit is cold, but it's tolerable on the metal. So that was the rate limiter. And then in the summer, there's no fans, no air conditioning, so it can be 90, 95 sometimes, and then it's just you try to wipe the sweat off your hands because it runs down so fast. You're like chalking your shit like up to your elbows just to absorb some of the sweat before it hits your hands.
Oh, sounds like a
Good times.
hell of an environment. Nice training
Yeah.
climate. But we are talking about now. I just saw actually your email, which everyone, if you aren't subscribed to, make sure you are subscribing to Dr. Mike's daily emails. They always come through with fantastic info and insights.
Thank you.
Just dropped our episode that we did just before the Christmas break, I think it was. Over the
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
And hypertrophy.
Yes, we dove into our approaches to hypertrophy and how we're not intelligent enough. We don't know what we're doing. Um, but it led to an interesting discussion that we started diving into. Or I guess an expansion of the conversation was around secondary and tertiary effects that impact hypertrophy, muscle growth, and overall training capacity that leads to the stimulation of hypertrophy. We know a lot of people we get big on MT. Mechanical tension is the main driver, and people start talking about metabolic stress and muscle damage and things like that as contributing factors or also a part of the equation. But the interesting thing we started really getting into was that I thought would be a worthy expansion of the conversation was the additional effects that go into training that allow or enable hypertrophy to take place. And I would refer to them, I guess, as secondary and tertiary effects that contribute to the overall equation. The same way, we look at total calories, we then break it down to macronutrients, but then, we look at micronutrient consumption and function as well. What are vitamins and minerals doing in the body and biochemical processes and exchanges that allow certain things to happen, that we can absorb food better, we can utilize nutrients better, the body feels better, oxidative reactive stresses and things like that. It's kind of in my eyes, a similar sort of hierarchy slash pyramid slash contributor where it's not just as simple as put tension on the muscle, it grows. There is more to it that we start to look at and go, okay, well, you yourself, for example, metabolic flexibility, it's literally what you teach and what you do. Improving metabolic flexibility, improving oxygen capacity, aerobic capacity, so that one can train harder for longer before fatigue sets in, allowing you to take training to a higher degree of intensity. You might get that extra easy example for people to understand. If your muscles gassing in oxygen before it is actual reaching exertion, it might be that your aerobic capacity is inhibiting you to get that next rep. That next rep is what might be allowing you to progress load. We know load is the thing that drives hypertrophy or starts to progress hypertrophy. Where do your thoughts sit on that? Is that in line with what you're sort of thinking? How can you expand on that? That's what I perceive as something that's missed out of the conversation quite often, that I thought would be a pretty relevant and interesting, I guess, expansive topic after we talk about hypertrophy.
Yeah. I think for aerobic capacity, aerobic fitness, there's I think two components. There's a direct component and kind of sort of a indirect component.
Mm-hmm.
So the direct component that made my head spin was years ago watching rower. I think it was at Ben House's first seminar he ever did. So Aaron Davis had a Moxie device. So it's a device you stick over the muscle, and it tells you like how much oxygen the muscle is using. Has a guy on a rower, guy's all warmed up. And he's like, all right, cool. So at rest, it's showing 85% what's called SMO2. So, okay, cool. So a lot of oxygen going in the muscle. It's hanging out at rest. No big deal. And then he's like, all right, we're going to do a wind gate. So 30 seconds, as hard as you possibly can on the concept tube rower. And what I was classically taught was this is, hardcore kind of anaerobic exercise, not using oxygen. And I'm watching it, and this guy's just going balls out. And the oxygen level in the muscles going down and down and down. And I think when he finished, he was 12, 15%. And I'm like, oh shit, hold on a sec. So you're telling me the muscle used a huge amount of oxygen during what I was taught was an anaerobic event.
Mm-hmm.
So either everything I know is wrong, or this measurement thing's a piece of shit. So I'm like, the measurement thing must be a piece of shit. That can't be everything I learned was incorrect. Long story short, met the guy who designed the device here at the University of Minnesota, hung out with him. As many years ago, I have 3 of the devices now. They do seem to work pretty good. They're not perfect, but they seem to work pretty darn good. And what I realized was, oh, as you do longer anaerobic exercise, the higher portion of it is actually aerobic, because nothing is really truly 100% anaerobic, nor is it really 100% aerobic. You've got this kind of mix going on. And when you add fatigue to the equation, you see more of a contribution from the aerobic side. Now, I've tried to play around with this a little bit with the metabolic cart and do some of the lifting stuff. And I would say my data is not super clean. And you kind of have to, by necessity, do like a squat or a trap bar deadlift or something, because otherwise just bench press and, kind of bodybuilder-ish type stuff is just hard with the equipment per se. Mm-hmm. So I do think there is more direct effect of the aerobic system on a longer anaerobic session, especially for more volume-based work, than what we would appreciate. Again, can I point to an exact research study on that? No, I'm trying to find one. It's just kind of more what I think is going on. So I think directly during a set, because we've all had this happen, right? So let's say you're doing higher front squats or safety bar squats or even hack squats or something like that. Like there definitely is a component, especially when you get into the more compressive based exercises, that you just feel like, oh man, I could do more, like you mentioned, if my aerobic system was a little bit more up to par. That's actually during the set itself. Mm-hmm. So I do think there is a direct correlation and more of a direct limiter. And then the more indirect effect is, what is the main metabolism you're using to get back to baseline between sets? So if I don't know what it is, but for me, if I do one arm dumbbell rows, so 15 reps left, and then immediately go to 15 reps right, I can spike my heart rate like pretty damn high if I'm going heavier on them. Mm-hmm. So there's this huge cardiorespiratory component. And what allows that to come back down to 0 to do another set is actually the aerobic system. So even if we just assume all of that is anaerobic, which I don't think it is, we still have to contend with the aerobic system as what allows us to get back to baseline faster. You can measure this if you want to use 2-minute heart rate recovery. We know that's been well documented as, parasympathetic reactivation. So how well and how fast can that aerobic system get you back down to baseline? So I think if that's true, which it does appear to be true, if your aerobic system is really poor, how much quality of work you can do, and then how much you can accomplish in a period of time. Now, again, you could say, well, screw it, I'll just take longer rest periods as a way to work around it. I think you can do that. But now you're talking about a limit of time that most people just don't have. And what are you going to do? Just keep making your training sessions longer and longer forever? You're going to be in the gym like 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours? It's not super practical. So I think that's from the aerobic side, that's kind of how I would look at it.
Yeah, I think that's a massive factor again, as I wouldn't even say a secondary or tertiary, but simply a extra component to think about is when we're looking at programming is time management effectiveness inside your training.
Oh, for sure.
If you don't have the time to do those things, right? If volume is purely a driver of growth and that's the only way you look at it, and it's like, I'll just jack up my sets. We talked about this on the other podcast where it was like, well, 52 sets on quad training. The idea of being able to do that in a session, and I'm just going to keep expanding the time requirement to get that training in. At a certain point in time, I'm just going to run out of time, and I'm going to run out of the ability to generate that stimulus, versus my ability to, say, handle heavier loads, my ability to recover faster and get bigger, more intense sets out might mean that I need less sets, which will mean I need less reps, which means I can train a little bit quicker, more effectively and efficiently. But part of that will come back to my ability to have aerobic capacity and be able to return to baseline quicker and know that I can get back to that set effectively, right? So again, it's and something that you teach quite heavily. And I know it's for a long time. I even talked with Lukey Lehman about it. We had
Hmm.
this weird demonizing concept of like cardio. What is that, Spanish?
Yeah.
And it was like, we'd have these bros be like, I don't do cardio. I only do that in prep to
Destroys
drop
all
body
your
fat.
gains, bro.
Exactly. It was like, yeah, this whole concept was like, oh, it's going to decrease mTOR signal or disrupt my hypertrophy stimulus post workout. It's going to fluctuate all these signalings that I have and prevent gains. But the reality is, if done effectively, and I usually prescribe it generally, like say if I've got someone doing leg training, I'll tell them to do the bike or stairmaster away from their leg training. But
Yes, I agree.
it'll be pretty much like it still needs to get done because it's going to, as we get into prep, where that matters, enable us to train at a higher capacity where oxygen and aerobic capacity isn't the limiting factor on your stimulus. So we can still maintain tissue, we can train hard. In off season, it's equally important in just general, compositional development, tissue development. It's still important to be able to make sure you have that ability to return to baseline so that we can train harder, we can train effectively, not have to spend 4 hours in the gym. And having a degree of cardio part of your program also means you probably live longer and live healthier. You can move more freely. You can, go into metabolic heart rate variability training. Being able to tolerate different degrees of stress in life means you're not stimulating sympathetic dial tone. The body isn't becoming aggravated and frustrated, and it's constantly alert and stimulated. You can return to a baseline position of stress free. All of that then, as a byproduct, enables the stimulation of hypertrophy. It enables growth of the muscle tissue itself. It enables you to actually stimulate the thing that we're trying to do at a more efficient rate. I would argue would be kind of like the conclusion you can take from that. So just in the fact we've talked about here, improving aerobic function, which for so long was demonized in the hypertrophy space and the bodybuilding space, you're drastically increasing the efficiency of stimulating hypertrophy and training capacity.
Yeah, and there's lots of examples of that. I mean, I think the best example, which isn't a direct hypertrophy example, is what Louis did at Westside. Like he probably maybe understood it, maybe he didn't, but he definitely got the method correct. Is even in powerlifting, where your goal is to lift a heavy ass weight for one time and then do it again for maybe a total of 9 times over the course of a day, right? Even in that case, which is about the most anaerobic thing you can get, other than maybe Olympic weightlifting, he realized that for the performance of his lifters, he had to do a lot of GPP, a lot of sled work, a lot of just continuous motion movement, because he realized, oh, they could do more volume, they could recover faster. And this is, and Louis didn't make any bones about this. Like pretty much everyone there was on PEDs and was using whatever canvas triple
No,
ply
they weren't.
thingamabobber they could do, to turn purple and lift a heavier lift, right? He didn't really give a shit about their health,
Yeah.
but he realized that, wow, this actually works for performance. So I think even if we throw out all those other factors, which I think are super important, that for performance only, at some point, it's going to be a limiter. And I think if you look at, like you said, volume, so I would say the ability to do high quality work and then just repeat it.
Mhm.
If you've got someone who can do, let's say, 10 sets of high quality work for chest versus someone who can do 20, and the person, let's say the quality of both of them, which you could define what that is, but let's say the quality of both is the same, I would say you're probably going to get a better result from 20. Now, again, it's
Mhm.
not going to be linear. You're not going to get twice the amount of muscle.
Yeah.
It's going to be kind of a curvilinear. You're definitely going to hit a plateau at some point. You can't just always add more. But I think that just that simplistic logic, people kind of forget. And then they get into all the crazy whiz bang techniques of, oh, loaded partials. And then we got to do this drop set here, drop set there. And again, time and a place for all that stuff. I think it can be important. I think it can be useful. But I think people use too many of the advanced techniques too
Yeah.
early, when it's as simple as, like, bro, your VO2 max is 21. It's like a fucking field mouse. I think we need to work on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's again, if that doesn't summarize, it's almost like the TikTok generation and the attention span generation has interrupted the training paradigm where it's
Yeah.
like my attention span is 3 to 5 seconds, so therefore I need the next advanced method every few weeks because I'm watching these pro bodybuilders and these elite athletes at the highest levels need those cool things, which funnily enough, I find there's always almost like a Dunning-Kruger where the advanced athletes come back to doing the basic stuff. They realize
Yeah.
over time that the basics were what got them there. It's that you might find the odd intensifier technique or volume enhancer that they can use, but most of the time it's like the movement selection goes back to being very basic, very monotonous, and very simple. But you get the average TikToker and Instagram consumer watching this going, well, he's doing this lengthened position here. He's setting up the machine to grab this part of the lat and trying to bias this position here, whatever it might be. I need to be doing that, and I need to be able to do that exactly. And we end up overcomplicating what hypertrophy is and how to stimulate it and what we're trying to achieve. And it adds these extra layers of confusion and distraction, time inefficiency, where the reality is if I just got you, like you said, 10 to 15 good hard sets of good exercise with maintaining control and tension, then you're going to benefit from that more than, two sets of, say, this strange nuanced exercise that took you 30 minutes to set up. You might only have an hour to train in total. We've lost total volume capacity because you're spending all this time trying to do these extra complicated things. When the reality is the answer is probably quite simple, and that is return to simple movement execution done really well under control. Make sure that the muscle that you are trying to train is the limiting factor of the movement, not your aerobic capacity and not a secondary or tertiary muscle that's trying to help out. Generally, you're going to get some pretty good results if you do that. Now, you then kind of get I would say the argument that, time and attention gets a big rap from a lot of different camps. I'm not sure where you sit with it, but for me, time and attention is really, I look at time and attention as a skill development process where I would use it for people. Generally, if I'm looking at 3 to 5 seconds of a rep, it's because someone has very poor movement mechanics or awareness in time and space. I'm trying to generate a control factor or a skill proficiency. Generally, I just encourage most of my lifters and clients to push to a 3 second eccentric, where we then kind of take out momentum. We're not just going straight bang one, straight bang one. We're not trying to react with stretch reflex. It's more so take the time to control a rep, 3 seconds, make sure tension's on the target muscle. But I'm not sitting there being like, we've got to do a 10, 20 second time at attention every single rep for 10, 12, 15 reps per set, because, that just starts to get fatiguing and exhaustive for no real extra benefit in hypertrophy. But yeah, what's your take on that?
I mean, I agree. Like the newer the person, I'm going to use tempo to basically, like you said, give them a way to control their form, right? So, like, I have a Voltra One. Shout out to Beyond Power. I am an affiliate for them, so whatever that's worth. Where you can do heavier eccentric stuff. So even new people, I'll put like a 5% eccentric on a seated row or 10% eccentric, and tell them, okay, I want you to take 4 seconds to basically return the handle all the way back.
Mm-hmm.
It's more or less because I want them to keep their shoulders down and back. And if I give them a little bit more something that's pulling them away, I'm giving a little bit more feedback that allows them to do it with better form. Like, am I really concerned with someone new about, doing a triphasic type thing and trying to get fancy with, eccentric overload and stuff? Not really. I think you can do that method. Obviously, I'm biased. I helped write the second book on the whole freaking thing. And I think it's helpful. But I think for more or less, it's just to give them a way to give them more feedback, better sensation, without them to constantly go searching for it.
Yep.
So my pet peeve a little bit in bodybuilding is I think they've gone too far down the internal cues only, especially on compound lifts.
Yeah.
It's like, I get it. If you're doing a highly stabilized, one arm preacher curl, great. Think about contracting the bicep as hard as you want. I don't think that's whatever. I'm not worried. But even on like a hack squat or, things like that, like I had a client who came here this past weekend to train. She did great. And so on her hack squats, I said, okay, we're just going to have you, since you're getting used to them again, go a little bit slower. And I want you to go all the way down. So we set the pins and everything appropriately. And I'm like, I don't want to hear the machine hit the bottom.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to hear that clank. So what does that tell me? That tells me you have to eccentrically control that all the way down. I didn't tell her I want you to feel your quads. I didn't, feel your right lat. Make sure your SCM is on. Like, all I said was, here's a position I think is going to be best for your setup for the muscle we're trying to hit tension on. So to me, that's more of a mechanical setup on the machine. We're doing a little bit more quads. They're going to be a little bit more narrow, a little bit more down. Knees going to go a little bit more over the toe. And then I just wanted to be quiet.
Yep.
That's all we did for the setup. So I think tempo is similar. If I have someone that's more advanced, I'm probably going to allow them to have a faster rep speed. And at the end, I'm going to ask them, hey, how did that feel? Did it feel like, did you feel it in the joint space? Did you feel it in the muscle? Like, what do you feel? And like, oh, like if I'm doing, for example, I did this past weekend, so it's just easy to remember. Like incline dumbbell bench press is using 90-pound dumbbells. My goal is to hit 6 reps. So on the eccentric is rather controlled, but on the concentric, I'm actually trying to move it relatively fast.
Yeah.
Now, again, my goal is a little bit more performance, not necessarily hypertrophy. But if someone was watching it, they would be like, I don't know, it looks like that movement's a little fast, but it felt controlled. I didn't feel anything in the joint space, and everything went fine. So because I think if you believe that muscular tension and volume are the main drivers, like you said, at some point, if I would have taken 10 seconds to lower it and purposely tried to break the concentric, you're getting way too much fatigue for not enough load. Yes. And you could make an argument that, for most people, as long as it's controlled, I actually want them to do the concentric as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you get into heavier ass loads and heavier weights, it's not going to move that fast because shocker, the weight's heavy. It's going to absolutely auto-regulate. But I'm still thinking about, I'm trying to move that load controlled, but I'm trying to move it as fast as I can, because I do think there's plenty of data to support this, all the way back to, Anoka stuff and all that kind of stuff, that you are going to get more motor unit recruitment, which is, one way of actually activating more muscle fiber and more tissue at that point.
Yeah, I agree in regards to when I'm looking at most people, especially coming through. I think the misconception in the hypertrophy bodybuilding space is that it's not a performance endeavor. I think that's a big mistake that people make.
But it kind of is.
It is. I look at it the way I look
at it on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly. On a day-to-day basis, every time you step into the gym, you are performing. You are performing the move. Even on the micro level per set, you are performing that movement and executing, right? So we're looking at it from a performance lens. I still want you to perform that movement with intentionality and intensity. I want you to be like you said, a great cue that I use is very similar. I want a 3-second tempo. If it's something on a machine, I don't want to hear it bang. I get that from my coaches too. I don't want to hear the leg press hit. I don't want to hear the hack squat hit. I don't want to hear banging when you're doing military press or seated vertical press. I want to hear control, or not hearing anything indicates control. But what I want to see, especially if it's in priming phases or warm-up sets or feeder sets, I want to see that weight move. Why do I want to see that weight move? Because it tells me you're going into that exercise with intention. There is intention to drive that weight, that load at a good contractile rate. That squeeze is not going to, that explosiveness isn't going to be consistent from first rep on the warm-up set to your actual top working set, because the load will regulate it back down and slow you. It's just naturally, it's the same way when we look at contraction as a proxy to failure. If I know that every single rep is 3 seconds, if that starts to speed up by rep 9, rep 10, or if I know the contraction is roughly 3 seconds and it starts to get 5, 6, 7 seconds long per rep, we're pretty much approaching that proximity to failure based on just looking at how your speeds are going. So we know, well, I assume, I generally take the position that we know that that speed is going to slow down when you're getting heavier. It tells me you're actually training harder. It tells me that you're actually pushing the load to a degree of intensity. So whilst warm-up speed might be, a 1 second explosive rep on a vertical press, as you get to your working set, that might be a 3, 4, 5 second contraction, concentric. That isn't telling me that you're rushing your rep. It just means that where you're still going in there with the intention to explode and drive hard, but the load itself is naturally slowing you down, which is still going to a degree drive tension on the muscle we're trying to work, because now that's trying to counteract the force, right? So I look at it as a very, very similar proxy, and I consider hypertrophy on the daily basis still a performance mechanism. It's still a performance action that we're trying to achieve in and amongst every exercise. But that kind of, leads on to other tertiary effects. And we're looking at things like, or secondary effects, even things like recovery capacity. Because then if we start to look at how do you recover, not only between sets, we've kind of talked about that with aerobic capacity and your heart rate variability. That is a huge component of it, and what goes into each session. But another massive factor that people don't consider, I think, when they start adding junk volume and they add all these extra sets and they add all this extra work, is recovery capacity between each session. And you start going day to day. What is your body like? How is it feeling? How is it moving? If you're pushing training capacity intensity so far, so hard that you wake up the next day immobile, well, then it's going to, like, if muscle is just tightened because it's sore from training, you simply, like, you're at a 9 out of 10 soreness every single day, you're not going to be able to train at your maximum capacity every single day and every single week, which is going to require more deloads, which is going to be less time at your maximal proximity to failure, which is going to lead to less degrees of progressive overload and training load accumulation, which is a driver of hypertrophy. So recovery between sessions, and that can be broken down as tertiary effects from a secondary factor, sleep quality, anxiety, mental state, how are you feeling before you go to bed? What is your nutrition like? What is your parasympathetic tone like at night? How are you de-escalating the nervous system before you go to bed? That interacts with your recovery capacity, which then interacts with your ability to train the next day, right? I'm curious where you go with that with clients.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think too often we over prioritize the daily session and under prioritize how much work can be accomplished over the course of a week.
Mm-hmm.
So usually with most new clients, if they're more on the physique, hybrid, performance type stuff, by the time I get them, I usually pull a bunch of stuff out.
Agreed.
And they're kind of
Yeah.
like, what? I'm like, give me some videos. I can guarantee, looking at your setup here, that you're probably not doing all that with pretty good quality. And then I'll just pull back to, hey, let's do, a simple one I do is like an upper body focused. All right. They're almost always going to do some type of dumbbell bench press, one arm dumbbell row. Maybe we'll move on to an accessory exercise from there, machine chest press, pec deck, then after that, whatever. And I've gone, pretty deep in, 4 or 5, sometimes 6 exercises pairings with that.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to kind of earn that extra volume over
Yeah.
time.
Yep.
And even then, I'll tell them, I'm like, if we just, so the sessions I do are like more 2 hours, like pretty high volume. So I'm only doing them like once a week for, more upper body type focus stuff, I guess you could say. But I also know that my A and B exercises are probably like 80-90% of the effect, so like and if you look at the time distribution of it, again, it's a little bit more on the performance side. Just doing a ton of dumbbell bench press and one arm rows, and the next one is an incline and then a chest supported row. That's probably like an hour and 10 out of a 2 hour session, and I would say probably 70% of my volume is accomplished by that.
Yeah.
And I do the same thing with lower body stuff. Lately I've been doing a lot more of belt squats, hack squats, one-legged leg press, whatever. I think most of it should be front loaded because that's where you have the least amount of fatigue.
Yep.
And then it's also the easiest to change over time because I'll normally then pull back from those extra sets of like the C, D, and E type exercises because I'm like, the stimulus to fatigue ratio, we're not getting a lot of stimulus. Like, okay, you're super advanced. Yeah. Maybe you need, this for that reason. And they're usually like, well, wait a minute, but I like doing all the, it's physique athletes are like, but I like doing the one arm split stance, preacher curls. I feel it in my left bicep more, but you look at the program, like, that's probably not what's accommodating it the most. And you're just, at that point, the bang for your buck is diminished. Where it seems like a lot of people do the inverse of that. They do a lot of super isolatory stuff, not as much compound work, not as much volume. By the time they get to later in the week, they're already pretty fried. They have no progression model for mesocycle, whatever. Like they can't run it for more than 3 weeks because they're absolutely toast. And then they're like, oh, I don't know why I'm not getting any bigger. So it's just prioritize that. And then what I've done lately, and I don't know if you do this or not, is the more advanced the person is, the less changes I make until I feel like they're really running into a plateau. Yep. Like I've been running almost the same upper body and lower body volume based days for 2 years now. And it wasn't until 3 months ago I had to make many changes to the lower body one. And I still left belt squats and hack squats in. I just cut back on all the other accessory stuff. And shocker, I didn't really get a whole lot weaker by doing it. I think I was actually impairing my overall volume recovery too. I don't know if you've done anything similar or if you would agree with that.
Yeah, I think it's again, I guess like a psychological, which would be I would call maybe like a tertiary effect. It's like a mental state for that initial buy-in to get someone to progress training, having some excitatory movements, some things that will get them, eliciting that motivation of buy-in.
Oh, for sure.
You'll throw in some variations and stuff that's excitable, but the more
But
advanced
I'm
I
doing that
find,
almost for entertainment.
exactly, yes, literally, it's because I know that you want to see that to keep you excited, to get you going, to
Yes.
get you in there. We need to do that. But even then, for the average person, I'll tell them straight off the bat, we're not doing 3-4 week exercise variations. We're doing maybe week 8, maybe week 16. If that's
Yeah.
the funny part is if they give me that delayed gratification, they buy in. I generally find they don't want the changes anyway because they're seeing these progressions. They're like, "Oh, this movement's feeling good. It's hard. I'm getting stronger at it. I want to keep
Mm-hmm.
going." So like they eventually convert themselves anyway. But as more advanced an athlete gets, the more advanced someone gets, unless there is an injury or a niggle that we haven't predicted or haven't been able to preemptively assess, I'll make some modifications. But I can run blocks for people for 26, 30 weeks where I'm like, the main adjustment might be set total. It might be, hey, I just want to mix up the movement mechanics. So maybe instead of a certain squat variation here, we might try a different squat variation here. And just the overall layout, identical. The overall volume accumulation, identical. The execution might be slightly different. I want to try something else. I was getting to the point on my hack squats where like food was getting too low, but I was noticing I was getting too much hip torque with internal rotation. It was
Mm.
accumulating so heavily. And I was like, I was reaching PBs in a prep where that, is not that it shouldn't happen, but very unlikely. And I was just getting this pain in my hips. I was working with Dill to open it up and try and get movement and freedom in the back joint of my hip there to try and just move it better and try and release the ITB. Took out the hack squat, swapped it in for squat press. Now I'm reloading a new movement. Total volume is roughly catching back up. Hip feels a million times better. Great. But we ran that. I ran hack squats for about 6 months with my coach. The more advanced I find people get, the more they're aware that they just have to run simplicity consistently. And something that I had in my notes that was like an undisclosed or unconsidered part of hypertrophy and progressive overload is being able to run an adherence over time model, an accumulation of consistent effort where you're not just trying to put in uh, excitable movements. You're not trying to chase novelty, you're chasing consistency. That, amongst everything else, to me, is a massive driver of hypertrophy because in order to get progressive overload, in order to improve exercise proficiency, get better at isolating the target muscle, you've got to run that movement for a long period of time. So I'm very much in the same camp where, if it doesn't, I will say this in check-ins all the time when clients are like, oh, what are we going to do about this? So there's like, if it ain't broke, why are we fixing it? You're getting bigger,
Yeah.
you're leaner, you're on more food, you're training better, you feel better, you sleep better. If the vehicle that is driving change isn't broken, why are we trying to fix it? And I think a lot of people get caught up in that novelty seeking, shiny silver, shiny object syndrome, right down to the nitty gritty of exercise selection and workouts where it's like, oh, it's been 4 weeks. Can we change it? What the hell for?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the biggest mistake I made early on. God, probably 15, 20 years ago was I was so afraid that people would think I was an idiot and I wasn't doing anything, that they were making progress. And I did pretty much a wholesale change to their program. And I actually fucked them up. I actually made them worse. I felt better, but unfortunately, it took me, a few cycles of them running through to realize I actually made them worse. And I'm like, oh crap, and so it's that fine line of, yeah, we're gonna do some of the similar stuff. Like we're gonna, want to have things that you want to enjoy, you want to look forward to it somewhat. I get it, but those are kind of icing on the cake. And again, if it's someone who's just doing general fitness and just wants to add a little more muscle, add a little more strength, like whatever. Like you got tons of exercise variations, but
Yeah.
I would argue even for bodybuilding, you have a fair amount, but you know which ones over time are going to deliver more bang for the buck. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
do I use leg extensions? Yeah. If you give me the choice between a leg extension or a belt squat with their knees forward, like going deep, or a hack squat going all the way down,
Mhm.
I'll take a hack squat and a belt squat all day, every day. Again, not that leg extensions are bad or not useful. It's just I know I can get way more adaptations
They're not
from
optimal,
doing
bro.
that. Yeah, yeah, and then I'll push frequency. So for physique stuff, if they have a weak body part, I did
Yep.
this with a client with shoulders. I mean, she got to the point where she was doing some shoulder exercise like 4 days a week, and some of them were pretty difficult. Again, we had to monitor it, we had to work up to it, we had to make sure we don't have
Yep.
any joint issues. Make sure she's warmed up, all that kind of stuff. Recently I'm been trying to do more. Been still working on grip stuff. I know I'm going to be gone like this coming Saturday for a week. Axel was feeling good, so I just kept pushing it. So this past week, I did. So my PR is 285, and I did 275 for singles on 3 different occasions this week. Because I'm like, hey, if I can get plus almost 90-95% of my 1RM, that's great. If I can do that once a week, can I do it twice a week now? Can I do it 3 times? This past week, I did it 3 times during the week. Now I know that unfortunately being gone for a week isn't like the best thing for performance and not having any exposure to it and then trying to test it when I come back. But all things being equal, like I know I'm making progress on that, even though technically my 1RM isn't better. Like I hit 280 the other day, so I'm 5 pounds off. But I know if I just had like 2 more weeks at home, like I would destroy my old PR, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's the same thing for physique. Like I will start pushing frequency because I want more exposure to that.
Yeah.
But then you have to back up and say, okay, what is our priority in this phase? And you can't have like 7 priorities because you'll just torch everyone.
if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. It's the
Yeah,
same
nothing's a priority.
It's
yeah.
the same in business as it is in physique development.
Yeah. And that's the harder conversations I have now is I don't think it's as much exercise selection and things like that. It's literally with intermediate to advanced clients I take on, getting them to decide, okay, here's our plan. Here was, for physique, here's the judge's feedback. Okay, we've got a year and a half before the next show. Okay, let's try to prioritize this amount of time for this, that amount of time for that. And they're like, oh, but my quads need better. So do my glutes. And, my delts are kind of small. My lats are kind of weak. You're like, oh, hold on.
I want to run 7 specialty blocks in 1 year.
Right.
But that's even there, actually, like it leads to especially talking about physique athletes and body composition. Something that I have found to be true for myself, and I'm curious what your take is, but it used to be, it was like do the dirty bulk, get bulked up, and then from the bulk you then cut down and you'll get on stage, and that was kind of how it went. But one of the things that I'm finding to be true for myself, for athletes, for clients, and I'm seeing across many, I don't want to say good coaches, I just want to say like, well-versed coaches or experienced coaches, is I'm finding that maintaining now a degree of, I want to say quality body composition, it seems to be producing, this is purely anecdotal, and I could make some arguments for why I think it is, but it seems to be producing a greater degree of hypertrophy and improvement in muscle acquisition, where I would argue it's, that the sensitized state that the body is in, with a leaner body mass, you have greater metabolic capacity and utilization of substrates. You are less exhausted because you don't have as much mass to carry, not as fat and heavy for no reason. So your oxygen you aren't dying sooner. All your blood panels tend to be in a better position when you're leaner. We can see that across many degrees of research and just reading blood panels. Hormones tend to be better. So that your testosterone and estradiol is a lot more in check when you're in a leaner state relatively before, drastic deficits. Sleep capacity, you generally sleep better. As you get fatter and heavier, you start to risk sleep apnea and blood pressure going up. So one of the things I'm finding, whilst it's not a direct measure to hypertrophy, I'm finding that maintaining leaner states is producing, whilst not some drastic increase in muscle mass, I generally find that the accumulation seems to be better in stimulating that hypertrophy and growing muscle tissue. What would be your take on that? Is that something that it's sort of shifting my view on the old school? Well, it's not shifting, it's kind of already shifted, but that old school, you have to bulk at a heavy surplus. We have, like, don't get me wrong, the people that are in the camp of, just do 100-calorie surplus and that's plenty. Shut up. I take shits that are 100 calories worth of like food. Shut up. a daily surplus of 250 500 calories per day equals what's 3,500 calories across a week. Generally going to
Right.
start to accrue some tissue. That's a conservative amount. That's not crazy. I generally look for the at least 0.3 to 0.5% acquisition across a week, or accumulation across a week, in weight. Generally indicates to me good growth in a lean state. But to the relative point in regards to that sort of hypertrophy stimulus, which is not a direct driver of hypertrophy, being in a leaner position seems to be showing better responses and results for me, anecdotally I've seen, in clients growing tissue.
I would overall agree, but what I've seen is I think there's a fair amount of variability to it.
Yep.
If you look at the research, there's basically only like 2 studies I could point to that would say, maybe like what you said, 300 to 500 extra calories per day. And I think on paper, I would probably agree with that. If I say for the average person could throw a dart at a wall, I'd be within that range, 3 to 500. The hard part is, we're horrible at trying to figure out the exact energy
Yes.
expenditure per day. If you get someone anal retentive enough, is got the tism and wants to log everything to the nth degree, like you can probably get pretty accurate on the scale. And bodybuilders tend to be creatures of habit, so you start reducing food selection, and now you're just repeating the same amounts of the same foods. We can argue about pros and cons of that approach, which there definitely are. I think you can get the intake side nailed down to a gnat's ass relatively easy. Again, not saying you should do that, not saying everyone needs to run out and do that, but I think it's possible. With energy expenditure, I just noticed that it's a lot harder. And so what I do with clients is I look at, so if we add more calories, are we getting a bang for our buck? So are we getting more performance for that? And what's happening to our other metrics? How is our HRV? How is our sleep? How is our blood work? Are we starting to accumulate costs somewhere else? Because everyone will accumulate costs somewhere else. A lot of people I know, I can list off clients I have in the past who, right around 16 and a half, 17-inch neck, like they got to break out the CPAP.
Yep.
Below that, they probably don't need to use it. We've monitored the sleep, we've recorded, everything's fine. Blood panels are the same. Like I have some clients who they have to stay pretty damn lean to keep their blood panels in range. I'd say the only genetic gift I have would be the capacity to get really fat and not have anything happen to my blood panels. It's like the only genetic
natural survival creature
I have. Yeah. Because it just they seem to stay pretty for the most part. So I do think there is a lot of variability. All things being equal, like we're trying to stay definitely on the leaner side, but we're also can't be afraid to increase calories if performance isn't where we want to be, because then we're not adding that overload, we're not adding that component, we're not probably adding quite as amount of muscle tissue as we want. So I tried using more of a surgical approach. I think the old past of, well, let's just dirty bulk and go from, thousand, let's break out KFC. The greasiest stuff, the high fat, the high carb, the breakfast cereal in the blender with more breakfast cereal with, whey protein and all the crazy stuff, because that's fun and it looks good on Instagram. And maybe given enough drugs and everything else, you can do that. But, as with physique stuff, then whatever you put on, you have to kind of get, drugs aside, you still have to get it off.
Yeah.
Right. And especially with natural competitors, I think that's where it's harder, because even getting leaner at some point, like, the client you helped me with too, could we have probably gotten her a little bit leaner than what she was? I think so. Would it have been to her advantage? I don't think so. You know what I mean? Because at some point you're just going to be compromising stuff on that end too. So all that to say, I do think it's an individual thing. I do wonder about certain set points that it appears to be like set points on the way up and on the way down. So for example, for myself, like, I was in South Padre, Texas. We were down there mid-October. I came back December 10th. Didn't bring a scale. I didn't log. I logged fuck all nothing. I ate Pop-Tarts, drank beer after kiteboarding. I still trained. I still ate some protein. I had vegetables. It wasn't crazy. got a lot of exercise, was outside, still had to work. Like literally my body weight was within 0 0.5 pounds when I got back.
Yeah.
Right. Because I've done this long enough to know about
Yes.
where I'm at, where the line is, when to rein it in, etc. When I got back, I'm like, okay, let's see, I've got a break until the end of January. So I really want to push performance because I'm actually home for this block. Started increasing calories, and then performance was better. So I just started whacking calories up higher and higher, more aggressive than what I normally would. And my body weight in 3 weeks went to 247, which I was like, whoa, that's kind of wild. But
Whoa.
performance also went up. So I'm like, hey, great. And then no matter what, it was really hard to go above that point. And I was
Yeah.
just eating more and there was no performance
Yeah.
increase. So I'm like, okay, so I probably hit whatever my new plateau is.
Mhm.
So, the last 3 weeks, my goal is just maintenance.
Yeah.
Not going to be adding a ton of extra carbs. I'm just going to kind of hang out at neutral. And for like 2 weeks now, it's 243 almost exactly.
Yeah.
Performance is still good. It's like performance is still good. Everything's going great. So it's just this weird non-linearities
Yeah.
of if you look at it on paper, it doesn't make any damn sense whatsoever. But those are the hard parts, I think, with people, because you want to see, oh, I gave a linear increase of 500. Oh, okay, they should be gaining exactly 1 pound of tissue this week or the course of a month, and it just never works out that
Yeah.
way. It's just never that simple, and that is the probably most of the discussions I have with people when they're on a plan is, and this is where the art is of just, I'm sure you've run into this too, of like, I don't know. Like everything tells me I should cut your calories this week, but let's wait one more week.
Yeah.
Or everything
Yeah.
tells me we shouldn't have to go up this early, but fuck it. I think we're going to go up by 300 this week.
Yeah.
Of just that feeling it out and then kind of seeing where you're at.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess it gives us a chance to move to like one more, what I would call like tertiary effect, or secondary.
Sure.
And that is diet in and of itself. And
Mm-hmm.
not just diet as in like adding carbs. You kind of already touched on that, which I completely agree with, is feeling out, how you're fueling and what the benefit is. Simply adding food. I think this was a misconception for a long time, and I've been victim of it, was adding food for food's sake so you can say your calories are up and you're doing
Right.
certain things. But you've gained no performance benefits. You've seen no accretion of new tissue. You've seen no improvement inside the gym. Your sleep is worse. Your health is worse. So now we've got a collaboration here of multiple tertiary and secondary effects that lead to better training, performance, stimulus, and hypertrophy that are now being hindered because of that increase in calories. So that in and of itself is a huge concept that people need to understand. I look at it, so to touch back on that point, because it's so hard to dictate, how accurate TDE is, right? That total daily
Mm-hmm.
expenditure. I look at more so like a percentage of weight increase per week. So if we're seeing whether it's like, say 0.3 grams to 0.5 grams, kilograms per week, I might look at that and say, okay, if that's averaging, we're pretty good. 250 grams to 300 grams, that if that's consistently happening, the jumps we're making are staying linear, your output's going up slightly. So everything's flowing there. If I make a jump and suddenly I start seeing like 600 grams up, 700 grams, okay, we're going to pull that back. Something's changed here. So because it's so hard to judge, I'll try and use any dietary change I use more like a percentage. If I'm in a deficit, I'll use a percentage gauge to stay in a radius. So like rarely I want to see more than 1% of total body weight loss per week, especially if they're natural, because we know that's probably going to start being muscle tissue. Well, you
Yep.
could make the argument. In accumulation phases, in gain phases, I would look at it more as like a weight growth in grams. So like 0.3 kilograms to 0.5 kilograms, that's sufficient. Anywhere from like 1.5 to 2 kilos per month. If you're getting that and not getting fat, you're in the perfect window.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I'd say that's
that
amazing.
that's the dream. That is the dream.
Yeah.
So like if you're getting that, don't rush to add more food. But even then, when we look at diet, right? So when we look at dieting, and I know you're big on this. It's literally what you teach, but how are you utilizing the food that you are consuming? Are you utilizing fats effectively? Are you eating the right types of fats? Are you utilizing carbohydrates effectively? Are you using the right types of carbs around your training? Pre and post training nutrition, and I guess like diet in this context, I use the word diet, is everything that you consume. How you consume that then will be your nutrition strategies. But if we're looking at that, we start to look at, well, how do you consume pre-training? Are you having, higher fatty foods and higher carbohydrate, complex carbohydrates? So it's not really loading any glycogen retention. You're just simply feeling full. But if you have something like a more sugary, like a Rice Krispies, or you have bananas and like very high fructose fruits, how does that then impact your ability to train effectively even during a deficit? How does the food sit in your stomach? Tolerances, like digestibility. If you have poor digestion, there's a couple of guys I'm working with one of our other clients on for his facility in some athletes that are performance based, and they're big guys. They need to move hard. They need to move fast. If you've got a large player or athlete that needs to move well and move effectively, and they've got food they can't even tolerate, and it's making them want to like shit their pants off the starting line, or they want to change direction, all of a sudden they're about to crap their pants or throw something up, that fuel isn't effective fuel. It's not going to help them perform better. If I have, and this is where I come back to with like body composition and nutrition into training, if you're fat and you're calling that an off season and you're eating large amounts of food to the point that it's making you gastrointestinally uncomfortable in your session, you're not going to train as hard. You're going to feel sluggish. You're not going to move well. You're going to give in before the set's actually closer to failure. So you're leaving 2 to 3 effective reps in the tank regardless. You might call it 2 RAR, but really it's 4 or 5. That all starts to add up in how well you are stimulating hypertrophy. It's not just what are the calories doing in the total macros, but then it's what, as I guess a subsect of that, what is the food that you're consuming? At what times are you consuming it around your training and around your life? Because then you can start weighing up. We tend to find people have larger meals before bed. Digestion disrupts sleep quality and sleep depth, which will then disrupt or force them to wake up earlier. For bodybuilders that I'm getting to back ends of prep, we need to look at when their last fluid intake was, because they'll wake up during the night to pee because there isn't as much soluble fat to store the fluid intake. So you start getting all these things where it's like just saying diet or macros is to the average person enough, but to the people we work with or the people that starts getting to that level where we're looking at every nuanced factor that goes into hypertrophy, diet and diet quality and food selection and food timing starts to play real roles in how that goes, in my opinion. And I would love to hear yours from a metabolic flex sort of perspective.
Yeah, the quality of the nutrition matters, and there's an argument to be made on both sides. Like I've worked with some people who have what I call like the porcelain doll diet. Like everything looks perfect, everything's measured out. They've got everything titrated to the nth gram in the off season, and I'm like, okay, you're scaring the crap out of me. Like we don't need to be this dialed in, 8 months out from your next cut. Like not even your show. Like before we even need to worry about any of this. Like just don't burn all your mental ability, willpower, whatever words you want to throw in there. I'd defer to you on the best word on that. And you're eating the exact same thing over. A lot of times I find they have digestive issues.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, my last coach told me these are the perfect macros and da da da. So in the off season, it's like, I just want more variety. One thing that I've done, I saw this from my buddy Adam Glass, is, okay, go to the grocery store and just walk around the outside, not necessarily in the inside. And I want you to buy 2 new items this week.
Yeah.
I don't care what they are. Like we can make your macros fit for whatever. Like some new crazy piece of fruit, dried fruit, like kombucha. I don't care. Like pick some, no, not a new energy drink. Like, come on, like pick some real actual food.
Yeah.
And then just slowly, can we get a little bit more variety in? Can we make sure your digestion is good? Clean up that stuff. Make sure your HRV is better. Do some aerobic conditioning. Make sure you got a set sleep cycle. All these kind of basic things. And then within that, I'm trying to still optimize their acute performance in the gym, even if they're a physique athlete, because that's what's going to drive their long-term goals. And if we move some carbohydrates around and find, oh, wow, that training session felt better, great. That's like a huge win. And like sometimes do we need to add more? Yes, or different types. Or, I've had athletes where, bro could eat like a huge Domino's pizza and go lift immediately after with no problems. I've had other clients where
horrible.
Yeah, like 2 hours, they couldn't eat they could not eat solid food for maybe about 2 hours, no matter what we tried beforehand. So, okay, let's do some liquid stuff. Maybe we do some dates or ripe banana or, something that's a little bit more palatable, whatever. Like you have to kind of play around with it and see what works best.
Yeah.
And then it might change a little bit over time. And there's probably, especially in the off season, when you have a lot of calories, there's a lot more freedom than what most people realize.
Yeah.
Like I play with for myself everything from high carb meals before, after, during, breakfast, whatever. And if I have enough carbohydrates, it doesn't matter a whole lot, really, is what I've noticed. Like if for me, if I get up and have a good meal in the morning and have higher carbohydrates there, even if I don't lift for 2, 3, 4 hours, that definitely seems to help me.
Yeah.
Then before training isn't quite as, I'd say, sensitive. Training, I might have some, intra carbs and some amino acids or whatever. And then post, like lately when I was really pushing training volume because I was home, I did the experiment of, I wonder how high I can get my carbs post training. And I got up to 175 grams, which was either breakfast cereal, which you could do pretty easily, although you needed more of a
Yep.
Tupperware dish to hold
Yep.
it. And I tried doing it also with like cream of wheat cereals and buckwheat and
Yep.
just a shit ton of sugar and blueberries. And, so you could do it.
Yep.
But I did notice is that on my high volume days, like I could still, if I did that and I did some down regulation immediately, so I've been using the shift wave chair and things like that, I could actually almost train pretty well the next day, which is kind of shocking. Now I couldn't do that more than 2 days back to back.
Yep.
So I do think like that stuff does matter. Micronutrients, making sure you get enough essential fatty acids, not missing anything. But again, you're back to there's more art to it than science. And you're trying to, again, what are you trying to do? We're trying to make sure that, in a more gaining off-season phase, probably have enough calories, probably a little bit more leeway. I really want to push variety. If you log at 80, 90%, that's plenty good. We're in a ballpark. We're going to watch the scale, watch circumference, watch your performance. If that's all going up, great. We're just going to keep, pushing that up and up to what we think is an adequate point.
Mm-hmm.
If we're coming back down, okay, now we probably have to play more with, at some point timing. I'm going to push stuff more pre-training, maybe post-training, sometimes in the evening, because as you know, carbohydrates before evening can be something athletes look forward to. A lot of times their sleep quality is better. They don't get up to use the bathroom as much, so I think just giving people permission to play around with that. And then, I'd love to say, oh man, this is the absolute protocol to do on that for everyone. And there's so many variables and individual differences and how they feel and how they perform. And again, the psychology on top of all of it.
Yeah.
Like I have some athletes who really don't perform that well by moving their carbohydrates to the evening. But if I do that, I know they're compliant. So, okay, am I going to trade off a 10% bump in performance for them falling face first into a birthday cake potentially this Friday again?
Yep.
Yeah, let's just have a few more carbs at night, bro, and it'll be all right,
Yep. Yeah, I'll like one of the things I found really useful during cuts is for the more like I would say type A high conscientious clients is like as the cut starts to cut and we get into the deficit and it starts to get nitty gritty. The main I generally focus around two anchors in their schedule in their day, right? And usually it's their training window and their work window, because if they lose their job for the training aspect or the bodybuilding aspect, well, I'm out of a job, they don't have a goal, they can't get on stage, so we all lose. So generally I'll give them these two perspectives of we need a large chunk of your carbs for the day to be around this window, and then we need a good amount of carbohydrates to sustain work performance. Whether, sometimes it might be if you're a morning trainer, I'm not going to care so much if you go to bed as hungry. We want it to be satisfied at least. So having a high protein meal, some vegetables for satiety, tie you over, and maybe some more complex carbs, like might be like more like a starch, potato, pumpkin, something like that, that's filling. But if you go to bed a little bit hungrier and then we wake up and train the house down because we have most of your carbs around that, that's probably the better layout for me. Now, again, understanding each person individually might be completely different, because then you start running into, well, what time do they train? What type of work do they do? Do they have highly physically demanding work? Do they just have a laborious job? Do they have a desk job? These things all start to add up. And as you said, it's a lot more of an art form than a science, but it's taking the science and turning it into an art. That's where, and to the point you just sort of laid out previously, even psychologically, how does someone psychologically view gaining body fat? They might obsessively fixate and look at gaining body fat as the worst thing in the world. I've got to get you to graduate up from that to start looking at what that can be. How do I get you to perceive that staying permalean is actually in interruption and a hindrance to progressive overload and to hypertrophy versus slowly graduating some body fat? Doesn't mean you have to get fat, but in their mind, it might be, well, if I gain 2% body fat, I'm obese. And that's
Mm-hmm.
obviously some things you have to work through with a psychologist and a clinician, and then also integrate that into their life and get them moving forward without being restricted. So there's so many things there that start to add up that it's so much more than just I guess it's the art of coaching, right? It's so much more than just here is hypertrophy, here's mechanical tension, here's how you stimulate growth. What leads into all those things? Well, this is in my eyes, the hypertrophy, mechanical tension, metabolic stress, that's up here as the tip of the iceberg. We've got all this under here that starts contributing, compiling to what allows that to take place. And it can be broken down to such a micro degree of day, week, month, mesocycle, timing of things, sleep quality, psychological states. Like there's so much to it beyond just simply here is your set and rep target, and here is, hypertrophy, go train and grow tissue. To a simple degree, we want people to think about that. But us as coaches, and I think to the coaches listening, because that is a big part of our audience, there's such an art to understanding all the variables in the equation itself, as opposed to just simply mechanical tension drives hypertrophy. Yeah, okay, that's cool. That's like saying a deficit drives fat loss. Great.
Mm-hmm.
How do we put someone into a deficit they can sustain for a long period of time to lose the weight without binging? That's the art. We know the deficit. Like a certain British social media influencer is just like, just eat fucking less and move more. Great science, bro. Like, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. We all are better off because of it. Now, how do you do that? That's that's where our role comes in as coaches. It's so much more than just simply here's the answer. And to wrap it up, what would you say? Because I'm just going to put you on the spot because clickbait and all that sort of jazz. What would you say is the number one misunderstood aspect of hypertrophy? Out of everything we just sort of talked about, what would you say is priority number one? Get it right, and you're going to see a big difference or shift in hypertrophy and muscle growth.
Actually, I think it's very similar for hypertrophy and for performance and I got this from my buddy Cal Dietz, is he was doing this huge, we were working on the Triphasic 2 book, and he had this huge whiteboard in his office, and he's drawing all this stuff all over it, and I'm just sitting there going, oh Christ, how the hell am I going to explain any of this in a book to someone who's not here, And I'm like, oh, so you're saying do the highest quality work first and then just do more of that. And he's like, yeah. So that's what I would say.
Yeah.
Like just make sure your work is high quality and then do more of that. And then what do you need to kind of keep doing more of that? And again, you apply that into your overload template. So you're not going to always have to continue to increase volume. You can increase volume, you can do density, you can do percentage of one rep max. I would argue quality of the reps and how they feel is a marker in and of itself for sure.
Range of motion.
You can add fatigue markers, RPE, all that stuff on there.
Yep.
If you just kind of keep those in mind, that's what like really changed how I program for physique and performance. Like if you looked at them on paper, like the exercise selection looks kind of different, but they're not as different as what you would expect.
Yep.
Especially for intermediate to advanced. Like I don't work with a lot of elite people. They're probably a little bit different, but yeah, it looks on paper very similar because I think a lot of the principles do overlap quite a bit.
Yep. And is there anything currently that Metflex is working on, the Flex Diet Cert is working on, that you guys are putting out? Anything else that is, I know a big one that would compound with this really well is the cardio for meatheads. I cannot suggest that enough for you guys to understand. If you were a bodybuilding coach, hypertrophy coach, body composition coach, get into the Flex Diet Cert. Done that, and it's fantastic. The cardio for meatheads one, I think, would be a fantastic. You guys are still putting that out, right? That's still available.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I'd say if you're looking for metabolic flexibility combined with flexible dieting, that would be the Flex Diet Cert. We talk about everything from protein, fats, carbohydrates, fasting, NEAT, micronutrition, sleep, and there's probably one more I'm forgetting, but so that's all in there. And then, yeah, I would say the cardio for meatheads. So I, it's weird to me, like, because a lot of the training you get in exercise phys is cardiovascular because we've got just a lot more data on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought I'd be one of those people that's like, oh, do your cardio, you crazy meatheads. Because I don't really like doing cardio, to be honest, but
Yep.
I've noticed over the years with myself, my clients, that the amount of benefits to doing it, from health benefits to how you feel to like
Yep.
even now having, come back and done a lot more cardio since I've had the calories and time to do it over just the last 4 weeks. Like I feel so much better. My HRV is better. My training volume is better. My ability to handle stress is better.
Mm-hmm.
So I designed it from the lens of, okay, you're already lifting and picking up heavy shit. Awesome. So here's what you would do for like the most effective things for the adaptation of better aerobic
Yep.
fitness. Now, again, you can use this for a caloric drain. That's fine. My argument is you should program it for the purpose of getting the adaptation. And then if you need to add more, we can tweak very easily how to do that.
Yeah.
But most people are applying cardio only as a caloric drain, and they're not getting the adaptation benefits of it.
Yeah.
And it's not that much harder to, once you understand it, to program it for both the caloric drain and for the aerobic benefits. So you get all of the other stuff. And so I went back and went over because I also realized like meatheads don't know any of this stuff because they've never just been educated on it, right? It's not their fault at all. So I went back to, okay, what is the Frank Starling principle? How does cardiac output work? What are these basic things? How do you program it? What are the things to look at? So level 1 is all aerobic fitness. Level 2 is more on the anaerobic side. And then we do fun stuff with like, I pulled a study that was like from Hickson, like the highest increase in VO2 max ever done in a study. I think the average went from 41 to 57 in like 12 weeks, I think.
Shit. Okay.
Now, again, this would destroy pretty much everyone. So there's adaptations of those things. And so you'll get all the protocols and everything and know exactly what to do on that too.
Yeah, guys, so there you go. Make sure you jump in and grab that as well. I think it coincides quite well with a joke that Luke Lehman shared when he's like, if for, vegan diets are perfect if you add meat. It's the same thing.
Oh yeah, they're
like,
great.
It's like it's great if you add meat to it. Or vegetarian diets are great if you add meat. Being a meathead is great if you add some cardio so you can live longer and feel healthier. Be a
I like
meathead.
that.
Lift the house if you want to. I don't really care. Be a meathead and then add some cardio so you don't die. The greatest advantage for hypertrophy is being alive to train. So, maybe look at that as a concept to consider. But my friend, we literally could have expanded this another 2 hours to talk about more hypertrophy factors. But yeah, I think it's been a great detailed episode again. My goal is always to help people think how to think, not what to think. And just this conversation alone, I feel like it gives you more framings to look at the bigger picture and go, well, there's more to this than just here are your sets and reps. But at the same time, simplifying it to the sets and reps in the program, it has its benefits. So being able to look at the concept of hypertrophy, not just saying, well, just go lift more, bro, or add more weight to the bar, bro. Like there's so much more nuance to it. So I think great conversations like this allow people to think better, not just what they're supposed to think, which we can very much get caught up in the Instagram world. So how do we find you? Where do we get more stuff? Obviously, the certs we just talked about. How do we find them and get in touch? And how do we prescribe to your email?
Yeah, thank you so much. Probably 80-90% of my content goes out directly to the insider email. Newsletter you can sign up to for free. Just go to MikeTNelson.com. There'll be a little tab up at the top that says newsletter. So you can hop in there, give you a cool free gift too. And then on the website, we'll have all the information about all the programs and everything. The Flex Diet cert is only open twice a year. And so I think it's, I'll have to look at the exact date. I want to say in my head, it's like February 9th, I think, 2026. I'll be open for about a week. So that'll be coming up pretty soon. So if you're interested, hop onto the newsletter and we'll give you all the details there. We've got the Flex Diet podcast, which you've been on before, which I appreciate. And then also probably Instagram's probably the next best place, which is just Dr. Mike T. Nelson.
Lovely. Well, guys, that is it for us today. This episode will be out. I'm not going to say why 2 weeks, because by the time they're listening to it, it's going to be out. But episode will be out soon. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us, guys, and look forward to the next one. Thank you for jumping on, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.